Well, good morning. And Jessica, thank you for the introduction. I'm Mark Neville. I have been with State Farm 23 years, and I am excited to be here in front of you today. This presentation is going to be unusual. I think you're going to find it different than what you're probably coming in here expecting. I'm going to stop there. Honestly, if I were you and I had this short, albeit very good looking, insurance guy in front of you starting off with that kind of a presentation, I'd leave. If I could, I'd be looking around for a fire thing to pull. I'd like, oh my gosh, this is an hour and 10 minutes long, and this is what I'm going to get? I'd be worried. That's not what you're going to get. But I want to start off that way because I want you to understand how important it is, that initial impression. I would imagine the audience here, there's very few of you that are classically trained in body language and evaluating others. But you're humans, and you have this innate ability to make a decision on somebody very quickly. And I imagine you did it to me. And as I said, I'd confess to you that I'd be like, oh gosh, this is going to be brutal. It's going to be brutal. An hour and 10 minutes of this dry topic. It's not going to be that way. I want to talk to you and provide you a perspective that I don't think you've ever heard before. Now, I would imagine, how many of you are seniors? Good percentage of you. Good. You're going to be interviewing, assuming you want a job, at some point in the very near future. And interviewing is a skill. And I have interviewed thousands of individuals. And I'd have to confess that there was a time that I thought, I know everything about interviewing. No one's going to tell me how to interview. Because I know it all. I've done it so often. And I started out in California in human resources, and it was the LA area. And I want to share this story with you. Matter of fact, you're going to find my conversation today is greatly about telling stories, because people learn through stories. So I'm in California, and I'm a recruiter for a large insurance company. And at recruiting events, if you've been there, you know the companies have their tables and they have their logo on the front of the table. And at this event in Los Angeles, I had next to me Google, which at the time was a company that a lot of people didn't know what the heck it was. But they had dogs with them. Right? Okay, so Google, you can bring dogs to work. And on this side, I had the FBI. And then there was me. And I had... At the time, we had to wear ties, and I had a jacket on, right? And it's an insurance company. And in the mid to late 90s was this boom of opportunity, which is going to happen again. But at the time, just an incredible boom to the point where I had trouble getting people to even talk to me. And I kind of understand it. You have Google on this side with the dog, and it's just a sexy company. And then you have the FBI with their FBI logos on. And then you have the insurance guy. And so if you have all these opportunities, you're probably not going to speak to the insurance guy. And they didn't. I mean, I'd be trying to draw them in. Can you imagine that? Because the last 5 years has been a terrible recession. Terrible. I've never seen anything like it. I wanted to point that out to you because I don't want you to be discouraged by the investment you've made in time, effort, and money in getting your education. I can assure you that's going to pay tremendous dividends. That's the best investment you've ever made, is to get your education. No question in my mind. But I imagine in your mind, there are questions because the economy's been so bad, and you hear story after story about individuals who made the investment to get their education and are now working at a job that doesn't require such education. Let it go. Things are already starting to turn around. From a human resources perspective, 2010 was always the year for the war for talent. A war for talent. Well, it didn't happen in 2010 because the economy just tanked, as you know. And individuals who were supposed to retire from projections didn't. Their nest egg got devastated, got decimated. They couldn't retire. So they've hung on in the workplace. Well, guess what? Now instead of being a big wave for the war for talent, it's a tsunami that's coming. And there will be tremendous opportunity for you. Now, it's a war for talent. It's not a war for bodies. It's a war for talent. You know, Greeley is a good indication of what that means. It's a sad fact for me that 50% of our Hispanic population in high schools are not getting their diploma. Half. It's tragic that we're allowing this to occur. 1/2. So when the opportunities come, they're not going to be considered the talented ones. You are, because you're educated. So please finish up. You've done the right thing. I want to make sure I got that across. Because now when I go to job fairs, there's a line of 10 deep to talk to an insurance guy, which is a great thing for me, but it shows me the times that we're in. What a difference. But the pendulum is starting to swing, and it will swing, and you'll get your opportunities. But you have to know how to get in. And I want to share with you today a very unique perspective, the perspective from a human resources professional who's interviewed thousands. I want you to know what we say when you leave the room. What do we say? How do we evaluate you? What are we really looking for? How do you interview well? That's what I'm going to talk to you today. Now, I did tell you that, you know, because I've interviewed thousands, I thought no one could do it better. No one could tell me what to do. Well, the organization said, Mark, we're going to take you down and we're going to have you meet with this self-improvement specialist. His name is Dr. Smiley, ironically. And the reason they did that is my company was spending an enormous amount of money with this specialist, preparing our upper level management for other opportunities. A lot of money. Because his job was to help them interview very well. So they said, Mark, we're going to let you go down there. We're going to let you spend a couple days with him, one-on-one. We want you to then fill his shoes and prepare our upper level management for future opportunities. Great. Again, I kind of had this, no one's going to teach me about interviewing, but I'll go. So it was in Tucson, Arizona. And I fly down there. And I wasn't that familiar with Tucson, but I checked in my hotel. My cell phone rang, and it was Dr. Smiley. And he said, Mark, I want to meet you for dinner. Great. And he told me how to get this very nice restaurant. I'm normally very cheap, so I wouldn't have been eating here normally. But I was in the lobby. I've never met Dr. Smiley. I didn't know what he looked like. And I'm kind of milling around the lobby waiting of the restaurant, waiting for Dr. Smiley. And sure enough, this older gentleman, and I'm being kind, I swear he's 100, approached me. And he introduced himself as Dr. Smiley. And I said, oh, great, nice to meet you. And we got a seat, and again, a very nice restaurant. And I'm having a beer, and he's having some wine. And I must say, this guy has all kinds of energy. You got to like him. He's just likable. And I was enjoying the meal. And halfway the meal, he said, Mark, what's our waitress's name? I was like, I don't know. And he said, well, watch this. And I said, okay. And the waitress comes over, and he says, Sarah, could I trouble you for some more water? And then she turned around, and he looked at me and said, what'd you say? And I wasn't stupid, right? I knew what he did. He used this warm tone. He used her name. He looked at her in the eyes, right? And, okay. And I told him, that's what you did. And he's like, yes. He goes, but I want you to watch the rest of the evening. Okay. Well, sure enough, when Sarah would come back to check on the table, it was like I wasn't even there. She would just look at Dr. Smiley. Is there anything else I can get you? Looking just at Dr. Smiley. So when she left, he's like, you know what I have with Sarah now is I have a term I want you to be comfortable with, a human connection. I have a human connection with Sarah. That's why she's just looking at me. And she wasn't looking at him because she was coming on to him because he's 100 years old, right? So it wasn't that. It was simply that he had this human connection with Sarah that I didn't have because I didn't communicate really with Sarah. And that was lesson 1. Okay, and I put note, nothing huge. So when we're leaving for the night, he says, Mark, I want you to come to my house tomorrow at 7. It's like, okay. And I did. And I knew this was not going to be an easy process because I at least heard of what Dr. Smiley put people through. And it's kind of a brutal thing. And I knew I was expecting it. And I knew that he was going to put me through a mock interview. Okay? Now, I've interviewed thousands, but no one likes to be on the side where you're being interviewed. No one, myself included. And you're not going to like it. I'm not going to tell you here you're going to like it, that I'm going to be able to get to you to the point you're going to like it. You're not going to like it. But you're going to do much better after this presentation today. So I knew he was going to mock interview me. And sure enough, his front door opened, and he had a table set up in his living room, one on one side, one on the other. And he had me sit down and he said, Mark, we're going to go right ahead and we're going to go into a mock interview. Okay, I'm ready. And since I knew this was coming, I had, much like I'm sure you do, I had my stack of papers. Because I knew he was going to ask me, or I felt I knew he was going to ask me, technical questions. What's your adjusted operating profit and loss for this area? What's your retention for this? Blah, blah, all these technical things that I was prepping for, and I had in front of me. And then he starts by saying, Mark, why don't you start off by telling me a little bit about yourself? I said, okay. And I went into this. I'm Mark Neville. I've been with the company for X number of years, blah, blah, blah. I'm going through this. He's very theatrical. He starts doing this. Or under the table, looking under the table. And I was like, what? And he says to me, I don't like you. I'm writing my introduction. I don't like you, he says. I really didn't know how to take that. He says, Mark of last night, I would have hired for anything. He says, did you like last night, Mark? I was like, yeah, I enjoyed it. I did, I enjoyed it. He's like, me too. He says, last night we had a human connection. He says, but this morning, who was that? Then he had me count to 10, using the same voice, tone, inflection, volume that I started off my introduction with. And I did, all right, 1, 2, 3. He's like, do you hear that? Who is that? Is that the business Mark? He goes, well, whoever it is, I don't like it. And this is hard to take, right? I'm telling you, at the time I was probably 8 years into HR, and I'm hearing this kind of feedback. I was like, what? And I struggled with it. And then he started going into some other items, which I'll get to. Fascinating. And I must say, I wasn't a believer in this philosophy initially. Then he taps my pile of material. He says, what's that? And I told him, well, it's my, prep material. And he takes it very theatrically, and he makes it and just throws all my papers all over his living room floor. And I'm like, what? Really? Is this how this is going to be? And he's like, and this is a very important piece I want you to hear. He says to me, Mark, you have to understand, this isn't about you memorizing facts and figures. You would not have this interview unless you already have the skills for the job. That's off the table. That's off the table. That's not what this interview is about. This isn't about, do you have the skills to do the job? That's not what an interview is about. He's right. He's right. It's not what the interview is about. It's about, and people at State Farm cringe when I say this, because it's so counterculture. It's about, do I like you? Do I like you Will you be a good fit for this opening? That's what this is about. People think it's about, no, I got to go in and show how I cured cancer and did this and that. No, it's not. They've already seen your resume. They've seen your cover letter. They know what skills you have. They're interviewing you because you have the skills for the job. Done. That's off the table. Now it's about, do I like you? Do I like you? High L factor. And it's not loser. It's likability. High L factor. Think about it. You've been at a social event and you meet someone for 20 seconds. And you part and you're like, I like that guy. I like him. Or conversely, asshole. Right? I mean, you get this read very, very quickly on this person. You're making all kinds of impressions. You're reading all the body language. You're reading the tone. You're getting all, and you're making this decision in your head about who this person is extremely quickly. No formal training, right? You do. And that's what Dr. Smiley was telling me. He says, Mark, the panel, him in this case, is getting information from the candidate, 80% of it nonverbal. 80%? 80% nonverbal? And then he says 60% of the 80 tone of your voice. Struggled with this. I did. I struggled with it. Wasn't sold on it, again, because I felt, no. I couldn't have interviewed thousands and not have put all these pieces together. It can't be. It can't be true. So he asked me, he goes, Mark, when you go back to work and you're interviewing people, I want you to listen to what your panel members are saying. I want you to listen to it. And I want you to be honest with yourself, Mark. When you're interviewing someone, find out and ask yourself, when are you making the decision on that person? When are you making it? So I did. I went back, and I was involved in a lot of high-level interviews. And there's generally 3 or 4 of us interviewing candidates that come from across the country. And after this Dr. Smiley training, I was very in tune to what's the panel saying. What are they saying? And I must say, I was kind of expecting them to say, wow, boy, did you hear that answer where he saved the company, X number of $1 million by implementing this, blah, blah. I never heard that. I know you can guess what I heard. I heard this. I like him. I like her. That's what I heard over and over again for our highest level of positions. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then when I asked myself, when am I really making the decision on these candidates? This is what I discovered. I would go to the lobby to get the candidate, and then I'd walk them back maybe 25 yards to my office. Before I was in my office, I knew. I knew if I wanted him or not. That's the reality of it. That's what I discovered. Now, it didn't change. That's the way it always has been. I just didn't realize it. Now, a lot of people say, I'm like, how'd the interview go? And they tell me this. Oh, God, I think it went really well. It went 40 minutes. Yeah, it means nothing. That means nothing. Let me tell you why it means nothing. And I'm taking this from a very large company perspective. Large companies are concerned about being sued. They are. They don't want to be sued. They're a big target. So everything large companies do, especially from a hiring, firing perspective, is very calculated and very careful, very sterile. Very sterile. And they're careful with it. And we know that we're going to ask every candidate the same questions. Every candidate is going to get the same questions. That way someone can't come back and attack us and say, oh, no. You did not ask me this, or you asked me something different. Nope, we asked the same questions. All the candidates get. So the length of the interview means nothing. I want to make sure you know that. So how do you do a good interview? How do you do a good interview? What's it come down to? I'm telling you, the decision's made very quickly on you. Very, very quickly. in your introduction. I'm going to break the interview process down today into 3 separate areas. The introduction being number 1. Then we're going to go into a very traditional, safe interview criteria called competency-based interviews. And then finally we're going to go to the ending. 3 areas that we're going to focus. No area is anywhere near as important as the introduction. Introduction. You've got to do it. You've got to be smooth, scripted, not canned, but scripted. Let me explain. I've interviewed a lot of UNC students for opportunities. We have a lot over here in the west side of town at State Farm. We have 1,400 employees. We have a lot of UNC graduates. I've interviewed a lot of UNC graduates. The good news is most people don't interview well. So the bar is not very high. That's the reality. So I get them in my office. One of the first questions you know is coming is, Tyler, tell me a little bit about yourself, Tyler. Tell me a little bit about yourself, Tyler. And so often, I get this. Guess what? I'm done. Now, I love kayaking. Always have. I just find it very relaxing, very calming. It's my happy place. It really is. It's my happy place. And when Tyler does this, I'm doing this. I'm done. Oh, now I'm in autopilot. And I'll ask him the next question, but I'm done. I'm done. Already done. Interview's done. That fast. That's why the name of this is Don't Let 'Em Kayak. You've got to hold their attention. In this introduction, I want these things from you. I want passion. I want enthusiasm. I want great eye contact. Now, when I started this presentation, I said, and I'm excited to be here to speak to you in front of you today. Right? And I also told you how important tone is. Now, you heard what I said, but you can't believe it. Because my nonverbals, especially my tone, is saying he's not excited to be here. He's not excited to be here. He's saying he's excited, but he's not. So you can't do that in an interview. You have to show the passion. You have to show the enthusiasm. It's amazing to me how many people I interview and they walk out in this 40 minutes. And I wonder to myself, I wonder if they had teeth. Because they never smiled. Right? Do they even have teeth? Think about it. You put yourself in the position of the human resources professional. I want you to understand this. Their product is human capital. That's their product. They're rated on what kind of quality do they bring management. What kind of quality do they bring management? So their ratings are on, all right, Tyler, you've given me 10 people for my department. Tyler's now the human resources representative. And a year from now, I'm going to evaluate Tyler on what kind of quality he brought me, what kind of product he gave me. And I'm going to look for, are they still with me? Are they still employed with me? What do you care about that for? Let me give you a statistic. I really want you to understand the dynamics of what goes on behind the scenes at an organization, because it'll help you interview. Our lowest paying position at State Farm does not require anything near a college education. Cost our organization $80,000 for that first year. $80,000. There's a lot that goes into that cost. There's the recruiting. There's the training. There's their benefits. There's duplication. It's because I have to pull someone off to train them, so loss of production. There's a lot that goes into that figure. But when I get that figure challenged within State Farm, it's actually higher. But we're still sticking with $80,000 being a very conservative figure for one person that first year. So if Tyler gives me candidates and half of them are gone because it wasn't a good fit, that's not a quality hire. That's because it cost my organization a lot of money. We lost it. Because 50% attrition in the first year, terribly expensive. Terribly expensive. And I'll then look at the ratings. How did they do that first year? And if they have poor ratings, guess what? Tyler, I'm on them. Like, my goodness, you're not producing a very good product at all. So understand that the human resources representative is charged with providing this quality product. Now, generally the progression is this. Human resources screens the candidate and then goes to management to make that final decision. Not always that way, but many times. So, if I'm the person screening in human resources and I want a good rating, right, for myself, I want a good reputation for delivering quality, I'm not going to interview you unless you have the skills. We already established that. But now I want that passion, enthusiasm, excitement from you. Because the last thing I want to do is to provide my management with these doorknobs. That when I say, hey, thanks for coming in, Mr. Bond. Why don't you tell me about yourself? And Mr. Bond goes, Done. Done. Introduction needs passion, enthusiasm in your voice. You have to present yourself as if you are qualified, which you should be, and you want this job. Now, I don't want to mislead you to think, now the reality is you can kind of pull the wool over people's eyes. That's true. But I've also found that a lot of people have great BS detectors. Great BS detectors. And I don't want you to BS in an interview. I really don't. I'm going to strongly encourage you to go for organizations, companies, follow your passion. Who do you want to work for? Who are you truly excited and passionate about? That's where I want you to interview. I don't want you to, go this organization just because they pay well. Don't do it. Don't do it. Life's too short. Follow your passion. And if you follow your passion, I would hope that you'd know something about that organization. Because one of the next questions is, Mr. Bond, why do you want to work here? Why do you want to work here? And UNC students, you'd think they'd be ready, right? I get this. Well, my parents have insurance with you guys, and they seem to like you. Really? Really? That's what I'm saying. The bar's not high. Companies have egos, as do people. I want to hear, Mark, let me tell you why I want to work here. One, I know you've been number one for 50 years in auto insurance. Number one. And you've been number one because of your ability to attract and retain excellent people. I know, Mark, that your average retention is 12 years, well above industry average. I know there's opportunities for growth and advancement. Mark, I know that blah, blah, blah. That's what I want to hear. Those are the things I want to hear. I want to hear that you've done your homework and that you've kind of gone into and say, all right, what kind of skills do I have? Why do I want to work here? And then articulate that to me passionately. And if you've really done your homework and this is a job you want, it's going to come out naturally. Let it come out. Don't do what I did with Dr. Smiley, thinking that, okay, this is an interview. This is an interview. I've got to be tremendously professional, and I'm going to give a different voice. This is Mark Neville. Don't do it. Don't do that. I want you to replace the word interview with conversation. Conversation. Like I had with Dr. Smiley at dinner. He told me this, and he's right. He says, Mark, did you hear this voice in the back of your head during our dinner last night? And I was like, no. Well, did you hear it this morning when we went through the mock? And I was like, oh, yeah. My little voice was like, what the hell is he doing looking under the table? He's not smiling. This isn't going well. I was hearing these voices. And he asked me about that. He goes, did you hear it? I was like, oh yeah, I heard it. He says, that's your self-reflective voice. The mind is much faster than the mouth. And you'll have this voice in the back of your head if you don't have a human connection. He says, that's your warning sign you don't have a human connection. When you hear the self-reflective voice. That's your warning sign. He says, the good thing is you can push it out if you're aware of it. And you can. It's true. And if you hear that self-reflective voice, it is your danger zone. And he's absolutely right. I didn't hear it at night because we were just talking. We were just having a great conversation. That's a good interview. When you're just having this, you're being yourself, you want to be there, you want to articulate who you are, what skills you have, why you want to work there, and it's coming out very clearly. I have interviewed thousands. I've never written this for interview feedback. Jessica was overly passionate and enthusiastic for the position. I've never written that. Now, I guess in theory you could, but you could be goofy as heck, and you could do it, but you'd really have to try. Matter of fact, when I'm coaching people and I'm telling them you need passion and enthusiasm, they think they're doing it. You're going to think you're smiling your butts off. But the person on the other side is just going to be like, oh my gosh, you're so excited to work here. I know from a human resources perspective that they'll walk on hot coals to be successful because they're so excited. The reality is, most of the jobs we're going to be competing for, you have the intelligence for. It's not beyond your capacity at all. But passion and enthusiasm goes a long way. A long way. And that's what we're looking for. We already know you have the skills, you can do the job. But if you're passionate, enthusiastic, you will not fail. That's what we're reading. We're like, oh my gosh. And then from a human resources perspective, they're passionate, enthusiastic because they know the organization. They want to be here. They're going to be here a year from now, quality of hire, and they're going to make sure they're successful, quality of hire. That's what that HR rep's looking for. But you've got to make that connection very early on. Make no mistake, the interview's on as soon as you walk on that company's property. It's on. A lot of times I go to my receptionist before I even get the candidate and say, what did you see? What did Mr. Bond, how did he treat you? And it's fascinating what the receptionist will tell you. Oh my gosh, he came in here, was on his cell phone, cussing up a storm. Right? I don't want him. I don't want him. Okay. Introduction. Unbelievably important for you. You need to provide them some information that's not on your resume. So often I ask, Mr. Bond, I'm going to call you Zach, tell me a little bit about yourself. I like Mr. Bond. It just reminds me of James. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And Mr. Bond, Zach, will indicate this. Well, I'm Zach Bond. I've recently graduated from UNC with a 3.0. I have been a member of this club. I've served as athletic director for blah, blah, blah. He's just given me his resume. Just given me, I already know all that. I asked, tell me a little bit about yourself. That's the question I asked, right? Tell me a little bit about yourself. Now, I want you to understand, large organizations can ask you a lot of questions. Are you married? What's your sexual orientation? What's your religion? What's your date of birth? There's a ton of questions because they're illegal. And large companies know that. Race, age, creed, national origin, sexual orientation, religious affiliation, it goes on and on. About what, it's just taboo, you can't ask, it's illegal. You can't make decisions based on that. But it doesn't mean you can't share some things so that they walk away with knowing who you are. They want a human connection. Let me give you an example. If I'm interviewing today, I talk about, you know what, first of all, Zach, thank you for the opportunity for this interview today. I'm going to use Zach's name. People love to hear their own name. It's just reality. They love to hear their own name. It's all part of that human connection. Thank you, Zach. I'm smiling my butt off. Thank you for the opportunity. I'd be glad to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm not going to do this. Oh, really? Think. Nope. Glad to tell you a little about. Well, I've been in Colorado for X number of years, and most recently I picked up fly fishing. And honestly, I probably have $1,000 worth of equipment that I bought over the last few months, and I've caught 3 fish. I've caught 3 fish. It's not a good trade-off, right? So I'm talking about, what does that have to do with the job? Nothing. Nothing. But it allows me to get this connection with Zach, because he's going to laugh, and he's going to say, oh my gosh, fly fishing, they've made it so complicated. Really? Does it really need to be that complicated? And then we're going to just be talking about fly fishing for a little bit. I'm going to tell them what my kids' names are and their ages. I'm going to name them. I'm not going to just say I have 3 kids and blah, 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 blah. Nope. If I have a wife, I'm going to name my spouse. It's important to me. It's important. And I'm going to name her because I want this human connection. I'm going to share information that they can't ask. Now, you can go overboard. They don't want to know, that I've got this ingrown toenail and it's really, no, they don't want that. Give them information, though, that you're just ready to give them. That gives them some insight, so when you walk out that door, they're like, I like him. That's the goal. I like him. That's your goal in this interview. High L factor. That's your goal. And it's hard to do that if you're just going to give them your resume. They don't know who you are. They already knew that information. Share about yourself. Now, this is 3-4 minutes long, this introduction. You know it's coming. Prepare for it. I don't care if you prepare in front of the mirror. I don't care if you prepare with another student or whomever. Prepare for it. Passion and excitement, enthusiasm needs to ooze from your pores, because the decision is being made then. It's being made then. I would predict that many HR people, if you ask that, they'd be like, oh, I don't know if I agree with that, because I was the same way. And when I had HR here, I'd tell my reps, tell me when you're making the decision, because you're going to make it very quickly. Oh, no, I don't, Mark. Okay. Tell me when you are. And sure enough, they'd come back to me, it may be weeks later, even months later, and they're like, you know what, you're right. When I'm really honest with myself, I'm making the decision very early on. Yeah, it does. I was the same way. I didn't believe it. But that's exactly what's happening. You need to know it as a candidate. You need to deliver this remarkable, passionate, excitement introduction, giving them some information that lets them say, I like him, I like her. That's the goal. That's your goal. So let's transition from this introduction, but I don't want to leave it you thinking that it's not ultra important, because it is. Incredibly important that you nail this introduction. I want you to think, before I leave this, I want you to think, because tone is so important to this introduction. Tone. Tone, volume, inflection of your voice. Think about it. You pick up the phone, you don't know who it is, you're getting tons of information from the phone. For someone you don't know, you may have made an outbound call or got a call, but you're reading their tone very quickly, and you know what you have on the other end incredibly quickly. First few seconds, right? You do. Just be honest with you. You do. So imagine now you're in front of them. They've got the tone. They also have all the visual cues to read. And I'm telling you, if you go in, and I'm Zach Bond, I don't know, what do you want to know? I am excited, Mark, really, to be here. Done. You're done. I'm going to spend 40 minutes with you, but I'm going to be on my kayak. You'll get it. You'll get the questions. You'll get the questions, and you're going to walk out of there when someone asks, how do you think you did? Oh, I think I did pretty good. I think I did damn good. No. It's over. It's over. So don't let me leave this topic without your full understanding that you've got to nail this introduction. Absolutely no question. So now let's transition to the middle part of an interview. which for large organizations is generally what they call competency-based. Competency-based means your past performance is the best predictor of what you're going to do in the future. It's an extremely safe way to interview. I'd be the first to concede it's not the best way to peel an onion and really to find out who the person is, but it's extremely safe. And a lot of large organizations utilize this very safe interview technique. I say it's safe because I ask you a question, you respond, and I write down what you've responded to. Where there are better techniques but require training that allow us to probe, and the reason a lot of large companies don't do it is because they're afraid their management isn't trained and may walk onto waters that could create jeopardy for us. In other words, they get into illegal type questions because they're not scripted and just drawn out for them. I hate to say it, but that's the reality of it. So a lot of large organizations, being very sterile, use competency-based questions. Past performance, best predictor of the future. You know you're going to get this question. Hey, tell me about a time that you delivered remarkable customer service. Right? A lot of the companies you're going to go for realize that customer service is paramount to success. And I don't care what industry it is. Unless you're going to work in a lab and you don't have any interaction with the company, they're going to ask you a customer service type question. Past performance, best predictor of the future. And this is how I'm going to tell you how to answer competency-based questions. I do have a very simple mind, and I think that's why I was in human resources in the first place. And I'm going to keep it simple for you. This is how you answer a competency-based question. You first tell them a story. You move on to what you did, and you give them a result. Now, I've heard this when you read books about interviewing. They'll call it a SAR model, situation, action, result. I like story, what the heck did you do, result. It's the same thing. So let me give you an example. Mark, hey, thanks for coming in. And I go through the whole introduction, passionate, enthusiastically, and they say, well, all right. And they like, I got some questions for you, Mark. And I'm okay. Yeah, I'm ready for it. Hey, tell me about a time that you delivered remarkable customer service. And I said, well, I think I have an answer for that. As you know, I was going to UNC during the day, and I paid my own way through UNC, and I worked at night, and I worked at Wendy's while I was going to school. And this is about 6 weeks ago that I'm going back, and I'm working at Wendy's, and as you probably know, Wendy's is open late. And I was working the night shift, and it was myself behind the register, and I had one cook. And I'm standing behind the register, and I watched as some lights pull up through our front window, so I knew we were going to have a customer very shortly. And sure enough, our front door opens, and this woman walks in, and she takes about 3 steps into Wendy's, and she slips. And she falls hard on our tile floor. So I get out behind the register, and I rush out, and I assist her up, and I said, are you okay? And she assured me she was okay. I think she was a little more embarrassed than anything else, and she was just kind of dusting herself off. So I returned to the register, and as I'm returning to the register, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I had just washed the floors. I did put out those little plastic yellow caution wet floor signs, but I just felt terrible for her. So as I'm walking back to the register, I made the decision, I'm going to go ahead and comp her meal tonight. I'm going to comp her meal. So she approaches the register, and I asked her, are you okay, ma'am? And she said yes. I could tell she really didn't want to talk about it. She assured me she was okay. She ordered, and I told her, I'm so sorry that you had this experience. Please, the meal is on Wendy's tonight. And I could tell she was happy, but again, didn't really want to talk about it. And she walked out, and I knew I was going to need to tell my management the next day. And I did. I told them, boy, we had this incident, and she slipped, and I decided to comp her meal. My management was fine with it. But about a week later, that same management person that I alerted to this situation brought me in his office. And I remember walking in, and I was like, uh-oh, what's this? And he says, Mark, do you remember the lady who slipped? And I said, sure, yeah. And I was thinking, what's going on? And he says, well, she came back in to speak to me, my management person. And she said she was incredibly impressed by your compassionate, caring personality and the fact that you made the decision to go ahead and take care of her meal that night. She told me this, that we have a customer for life. Which made me feel really good. Okay, period. That's my answer. Let me tell you what I did. I told you a story. I told you a story. And if I did the story right, you saw my girl. I didn't tell you much about her other than she was female. You saw my tile floor. You saw my register. You saw this whole scenario. Because you're into my story. Because I gave you my story. Then I told you what I did. I helped her up. I comped her meal. Right? I told you. And what's the result? What's the result here? I have a customer for life. How do you know that? I told you. That's how you answer a competency-based question. Story, what did you do? Result. Now, if you're missing any of those three pieces, they're going to get a follow-up question. Like, well, what happened to her? I didn't get enough into my story. How did she slip? What? You know, you can get all these little follow-up questions because you didn't tell enough of the foundational story. Or, of course, well, what did you do? Right? You didn't get into that. Or, well, what happened to her? Result. If you get those follow-up questions, your signal, you're not giving them all the information they need. Okay, so this is generally the next question I get. Oh my gosh, how can you prepare for all these questions? There's so many different competencies. You can't. You can't prepare for everything. What I'm going to encourage you to do is come up with what I call your 5 big hitters. Your 5 big hitters are your 5 stories that have a nice what did you do and result to them. Now think about it. I could have used that Wendy's story for decision making, right? If you give me time, you had to make a decision, but I could have used it for that. I could have used it for resourcefulness, customer service. There's a number of competencies. I could have weaved that same story to the person who's interviewing me. The same story. Come in. Right? So you're going to need to come up with 5 big ones. That's what I want you to do in advance of your interview. Now realize they shouldn't be all slanted towards one area. Customer service, for example. Try to come up with leadership examples. Jessica's president of the business fraternity. Is that correct? Right? Guess what she's going to use for one of her 5 big hitters? President of the fraternity. It's going to have a story. I became president, blah, blah, blah. She's going to have a story. What did you do? And the result of my tenure as being president, blah, blah, she's going to get into that. That's going to definitely be one of her 5 big hitters. You need 5. And it doesn't have to be curing cancer. Did I cure cancer by comping her meal? No. No. And it's not a big deal. But the person who's interviewing me got the impression, okay, he gets it. He is customer oriented. He is willing to make decisions. He does take initiative. You're getting all those reads from that same example. Okay? Does that make sense? You've got to be prepared for it. Now what you're going to get, because you're going to prepare positive, positive, positive. You're going to prepare for the positive. And they're going to throw you a negative. They're going to. I'm shocked when they don't right now. I'm really surprised when people don't get a negative question. A negative question is, Jessica, tell me about a time that you were unable to fulfill a commitment. Tell me about a time that you missed a deadline. Those are negative type questions. And people, when they get a negative. One of my favorite ones to do is to say, Tyler, boy, nice interview. Nice interview. I appreciate your knowledge of this organization. I love your passion and enthusiasm. And I can tell from this dialogue that you're a good communicator. I've read your cover letter. I think you have good written skills. You've shown me that you take initiative, that you have teamwork. Matter of fact, I'm very impressed. What I want to know from you, Tyler, is what are your two weaknesses? What are your 2 weaknesses? All right, put yourself in Tyler's position right now. You're on the spot. What are your 2 weaknesses? You're like, oh, God, help me. Right? And interesting things get blurted out. Such as, I've been told I'm not really good, working in a team. Blah, blah. Oh, you're done. Done. You just killed yourself. You can't have a weakness that's essential to the position. You can't. You give them some essential criteria, some essential competency to success in the position as a weakness, you're killing yourself. ROTC? Is that what you are? All right, if I'm interviewing her for a lieutenant position, and she says leadership is her weakness, I've got a problem. Right? Leadership is my weakness. I don't have a good track record of successfully leading people. And she's looking to be an Army officer, I'd have problems with that. And if I were on the board making that decision, I'd probably say no. No, that's too essential for her success. So what do you do? What do you use for weaknesses? Well, our future Army officer here should say something like this. A weakness. First of all, Mark, thank you for the compliments. I really consider myself very computer literate. I'm good with Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. But I'd have to concede that I'm not very good with Access. And I know Access is a very powerful database, and I can see some applications both in school and in a work environment. But I'm not very good at it. So what I've done is I've signed up for beginning Access at a junior college, just to help me with that. Okay, so let's dissect that, because you're going to get a weakness, and you need to prepare for it. 1, as an Army officer, I don't care that she doesn't know Access. It's not essential to her leading soldiers. Not essential. Secondly, the way I teed it up is I'm not a computer illiterate. I already took that off the table. Third, I'm doing something about it. Very common mistake. I'll give you another example because you need to understand this. Weakness. I'm good in speaking to an audience of maybe 20 people. It gets much bigger than that, and I'm really not that articulate. So I've enrolled in Toastmasters to help me with that. Same thing, right? It's not that you can't communicate. You can. It's just when the audience gets huge that you're not as articulate, and you're doing something about it. Beautiful. Beautiful example. So many people leave it what I call a dangling weakness. A dangling weakness. They confess the weakness, and they're like, it's a weakness. It's a weakness. So don't let that happen. That's the trap in that. 2 traps, really. One is you use an absolute essential competency for the job. Second trap is you're not doing something about it. So think about what you're doing right now to improve. Whatever that may be. A lot of people, when I ask that question, they're like, well, my golf game. And we laugh and chuckle. Then we come back and go, no, more of a business competency. Nice try. Nice try. But we're going to look for that business competency. Okay, so prepare yourself. You've got to be self-aware enough to have a weakness. At least one. I like when you have 2. Ready to go, not essential, and you're doing something about it. Okay, I'm going to transition now to the third part of the interview. An important piece. Nothing is nearly as important, however, as the introduction. Our ROTC friend here reminds me, interviewing thousands, there's a ton of stories. I got 1 million stories that I could tell you guys. But my dad was a Marine, and a a letterhead came in, a resume, and it had a Marine Corps logo on it, which is the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. And it caught my eye, and I was like, I want to interview this guy. I want to interview him. And he was an enlisted Marine who was recently out, and he was looking for a job. I want to interview him. So he comes in my office, and I must say I could smell smoke on him prior to him coming in, which is it's just not a good thing for an employer to smell. So if you smoke, you got to mask it. I want you to understand that, because it's already a turnoff. Not because I have anything against smoke. It's just I know statistically there are more sicknesses, and they'll take more breaks and these kind of things. So it's right off the bat. I'm kind of, before I even really talk to him, I could smell it. So he comes in, he's in my office, and I ask him that customer service question, because I've got customer service jobs I was trying to fill. And he tells me this story. He says, well, Mark, I think I have one that answers your question. He goes, I just got out of the Marine Corps. I'm working at a dry cleaners. And he in the Marine Corps was a gunnery sergeant. And they have kind of a reputation of just being kind of gruff. Well, and he fit that bill. So he tells me, so I'm working at the dry cleaners, and I'm behind the counter, and this lady approaches, and she's chewing my butt off. He didn't use the word butt. And he says, I wanted to jump over that counter and stick my boot up her butt. He again didn't use butt. And he says this, he pauses, but I didn't. I was like, okay, great customer service example. Yeah, so you can imagine, bar's not high. Bar's not high. Now obviously, did I hire him? No, I was afraid of him in my environment. Honestly, I was like, oh boy, is it just a recipe for disaster? Didn't touch him. Okay, so let's transition to the last part of an interview. A part that so many people miss. They just miss it. You know it's coming when you hear something like this. Jessica, thank you for coming in. That's all the questions I have for you. Do you have anything for me, or is there anything you want to leave me with? Right, that's your cue. This bad boy's wrapping up. It's wrapping up. This is what I get most times. Oh, no, Mark, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. That's what I get more often than not, especially on what I call a screening interview, your initial interview. Matter of fact, I want you to know, you're going to get into an organization. Don't think that's your last interview. Don't think, you interview all the time in a large organization for jobs. All the time. These skills that I'm telling you about today apply to each one of them. Same thing. It's the same thing. It's that likability. They wouldn't interview you for the job unless they knew you had the skills. Okay, so now you know this thing's wrapping up. I don't want you to say, oh yeah, thank you for the opportunity, looking forward to hearing from you. No, don't want you to do it. Now, I'm going to do something that's kind of goofy. I'll be the first to admit it. It's goofy. But you'll remember it, and that's why I do it. I love the Summer Olympics. It's coming up this summer, right? London 2012. Love it. I always have, even as a small kid. Loved watching it. Always really liked gymnastics, too. And in gymnastics, at a high level, like the Olympics, there's judges from across the world that are evaluating. Right? So they're watching Jessica, and they're like, okay, Jessica, release skill, nice. Strength skill, nice. They have all these criteria that they have to check off in that what they're judging on. You know what I'm saying. You've seen it. Then, to my amazement, it always comes down to this. Right? It's, oh, no, she took a step. She took a step. She's out of the gold. Right? You're like, oh my God, what, that little teeny step? Yeah. That was it. That's her dismount. This is your dismount in your interview. And in a high level of competition, the dismount can make a difference. High level. You're a competitor. It might be between you and somebody else, which happens, as you can imagine. Now, if there's multiple positions and you're that close, you're probably going to get the job. But in a high level of competition where the judging is so critical, they're like, oh my gosh, Zach had a wonderful introduction, but so did Tyler. They both answered the competency-based questions very well. But man, did you see Zach's dismount? His ending, his passion, his enthusiasm, his excitement for the job, the fact that he sold us on his skills. You got it. You got it. There's two areas that's scripted in an interview. Shouldn't be canned, but are really scripted. Your introduction. You're ready to go with it. And your dismount. And your dismount. And it goes something, it's very customized, but it goes something like, you know, Jessica, thank you for the opportunity that you've afforded me today to have this interview. As you can probably tell, I'm very excited for this. I'm excited, Jessica, because I know this organization. I know the skills I have, which I hopefully articulated. I'm a great team player, excellent communication skills, attention to detail. I strongly believe, Jessica, that I have all the skills necessary for a high level of success in your organization. And I look forward to hearing from you. Was it long? No. No? Was it passionate? Yes. Was it heartfelt? Yes. Did I sell some skills on her? Yes. I told you that I've never written overly passionate, enthusiastic. Conversely, I've written lacked passion and enthusiasm, failed to sell skills. Most common. Most common feedback. Failed to sell skills. Failed. Now, most of us in this audience are humble, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. You know, no one wants to be around somebody who brags about every accomplishment they do until the interview. This is the time for you to sell your skills. This is not the time for you to be humble. You've got to sell your skills. One, you have to know what skills are necessary for success in that job. You need to know that. And then you need to make sure they understand that you know that and that you have acquired those skills just to get them more comfortable with making you the person they select. Don't let that... two things. Don't let them say lacked passion and enthusiasm. I'll be disappointed in you. And make sure you sell those skills. Make sure you're selling them those skills. You have to. Very important. Okay, so the interview is now going to end. I've asked a lot of people after the interview, how did it go? Did you do your dismount? Which now hopefully makes sense to you guys. Did you do your dismount? And I get this periodically. Mark, I didn't get the opportunity. I'm like, what? What do you mean? You didn't get the opportunity. Well, Mark, they said, thanks for coming in, Jessica. We'll let you know. Okay. Well, and they stood up. And I was like, okay, and just shook their hand and left. No. This is your interview. This is your time. Take it. To say, you know, Jessica, before we end, if there's just a couple more things I want to talk to you about. Take it. Your interview. Jessica, there's, one, I'm very excited, as you can probably tell. I also want to make sure, and you're going into your dismount. You're going to give me your dismount. So think about what's the human resources person thinking? Are they going to think, oh my God, overly aggressive? No. They're going to think, nice, passionate, enthusiastic, really wants the job. Understand that HR person is evaluated on that product. They want just that. They want someone who wants the job, who knows what's necessary for a high level of success in that job. There's no reason for any of you to walk into an interview with limited information about whatever that position or organization is. No way. Not with. There's just too much information on the internet. You're crazy. But it does still amaze me. I told you, UNC students, why do you want to work here at State Farm? Know nothing about it. Nothing. Nothing. Terribly disappointing. You need to do your homework on whatever position, organization you're looking for. Not only do your homework, but tell yourself, am I passionate about this? Is this what I want to do? Is this where my strengths are? And if the answer is no, don't do it. Don't do it. Find that job that lights your fire. And if it's Google or the FBI, then so be it. And so be it. Because as I said, they'll sniff it out. Now, I feel bad. There are times that I know I've coached people who have gotten jobs they probably shouldn't have gotten. And it's funny, Dr. McClatchy, we've done this talk a few times to her finance class. It's a smaller audience, and one of the classes, one of the guys said, "I'm going to use these techniques to pick up chicks at a bar." There's an evil genius in every crowd. I don't know if he was successful or not, but that stuck with me. I laughed at it because the reality is a human connection is a human connection. And it will apply to that scenario. He was right. He was right. Likability is what you need to demonstrate. I hope I've given you some different perspective. I've given you information I can assure you that HR traditionally doesn't share. I've heard all and read all the books. What to wear. Right? Don't chew gum. Don't do this. These kind of things. Obviously, I didn't talk about any of that. There is some truth to what to wear. No question. I'm not good at that. I would seek counsel on that if I were you. What's your color? What works well for you? You need to dress professionally. No question. The don't chew gums. Absolutely, they're true. But I want you to understand what really is going on behind that interview, assuming this is an interview that you had to apply for with a resume or something online, that they already have this information, they've made the determination, you have the skills. No, this is about, do they like you? Are you a good fit for this opening at this time? That's what this interview is about. Make no mistake about it. Good luck to you guys. You have, you're entering still a tough economy, but the jobs are starting to come, but you're young and you're going to have opportunity galore in the next handful of years. I have absolutely no question about it. I know organizations are already starting hiring. We are concerned, large organizations, about what we call our succession planning. We know how many retirees we have. We're amazed how many have stuck on and continue to work. But we also know as the market increases, which has been pretty good, the Dow's up 5% for year to date, that causes an exodus of older employees. And as one employee leaves, guess what? We need to hire behind it. It creates an entire vacuum effect. You will have opportunities galore. Things that you haven't seen for 5 years are going to come. So I'm proud of you for sticking in school. It's an absolute investment that will pay dividends. Hopefully you'll take away some of this I told you about today. You may not buy it, but I implore you to give it a try. You'll be amazed about this likability. Make sure that you deliver it to them. Are we all set? Are we good on time? All right. Good. Thank you, guys.